Live from New York, it's the Fantasy Empire. I'm Theo Gremminger, and as always, Chris Vacarro here. I'm filling in for Nando Di Fino. Shout out to Nando. We hope you're doing well. Nando will be back in the Fantasy Empire soon. But Chris, this is like we skipped the music today on the opening. We're going like a cold opening because this is a really tough. This is a tough one. I mean, we got to talk about the big injuries to start out the show. And we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show. What is a harder thing for fantasy managers to deal with? Losing Justin Jefferson, who you took with the 101. I mean, that's absolutely catastrophic. But losing DeVon Achane, who in my NFFC and FFPC leagues, I would take him around round 10. For some people in home leagues, they got him as a waiver wire ad. And in some leagues, he fell to like the 12th round. Any way you cut it, he was like found money for fantasy managers. So what is a harder blow to take, Jefferson or Achane?
Well, it's Jefferson, Theo. But, and as for Achane, you've been in my thoughts all week, Theo. My condolences to you, my friend.
It's not over.
It's been a rough week.
It's just paused.
That's right. He'll come back at some point, and so will Jefferson. But for your question, Theo, I still think it's Jefferson. He was the 1-1. He's the anchor of your team. You had a banked in 25 points every week, the guy that you built your team around. So for me to answer that question, it would still be Jefferson. But don't get me wrong, when you hit on that mid-round superstar breakout pick, and then you add that to a solid fantasy team around it, those are devastating just as well, Theo. So, neither one feel good. They both are kicking the balls to you and your fantasy team. But when you lose your first round pick, it's tough to overcome that throughout the course of the season, Theo. And trust me, I know that as a big Nick Chubb owner this year, going at that 1-2 turn, you look at your teams, you look back on your teams, and it's like, oh my God, I have a solid team here. If I could have just had Nick Chubb back in on this team, where could I have possibly been? So it's tough to overcome both of these losses. But if you drafted well early on, you could still get by with the loss of Achane for the next month or so.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. If you drafted Justin Jefferson, it's really, really tough for you to overcome that, especially because like you would have had to kind of nail kind of the nuts at the 2-3 turn in FFPC. Or in NFFC, with the third round reversal, you would have really had to nail it, with the 212 and then potentially your next two picks. But
yeah,
there hasn't been like a ton of slam dunk, give you big time production guys coming from that range. So I don't know. The Justin Jefferson one hurts a lot, but I'll say, Chris.
How about this? I'm sorry, Theo. I'm sorry.
No. You go.
How about this? Because I was looking through a couple of my leagues. How about all the guys that decided to go split it up? If you had a bunch of number one overall picks this year, Theo, and you went Jamar Chase at 1, and then Jefferson went 2nd, and I was in 3 big drafts where this happened. Actually, the one that we were in New York City, Jamar Chase went 1, and Jefferson fell to 2. And through 4 weeks, how big of it looked like a major mistake if you passed on Jefferson at 1, and now all of a sudden you look up in week 5 and it flips completely. You're like, oh my God, I got such a break here. Jefferson's going to be out for the foreseeable future. Looks like Jamar Chase is back. He blows up this past week, and you have a lot more confidence in him going forward. Now, all of a sudden, that flips the people that took a chance on Chase and Jefferson, because as we got to our big drafts the last couple of weeks of the season, it seemed like the gap was closing between Chase and Jefferson for that number 1 pick. And a lot of people were like, you know what? It's maybe 60-40 in Jefferson's side. But if I have a bunch of number 1 picks, I'm going to split them up, on a 2-to-1 type breakdown. And some people did that. And now it's, a really big difference. But I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No. I think it's a great point, and I think it's like the narratives change so quickly in fantasy football. Guys do get healthier, offenses do get better, and like the chase, it was more like the Joe Burrow was kind of left for dead, and then you have the combination of Cincinnati just saying, we're getting the ball to Chase every single time we have an opportunity to, and Joe Burrow getting healthy at the right time. And then you flip that around with Minnesota's season is falling apart. They're heading into Chicago, and I really believe like this is the tilting game for them. They could drop to 1-5 and they could lose a divisional game at the same time. And Cincinnati, they're sitting at 2-3 now. Joe Burrow looks healthier, and the division looks kind of up for grabs now. Baltimore is having some issues. Pittsburgh is somewhat limited, and Cleveland is somewhat limited as well. So yeah, it's definitely a funny point. And Chris, the boomer 101 pick, the old man pick of the guy saying, you know what, I'm gonna take Christian McCaffrey. That guy looks like the sharpest guy in the room. We talked about this on the Fantasy Empire last week. You know that that's your cheat code. That's your 30 points per game. So the narratives change all the time. And Chris, I also
it's funny too. This past week, McCaffrey had his first off game, where he didn't go completely crazy. But when you look at the top of draft boards, usually there's like a big miss. Theo really wasn't. Everybody was right with how we broke down the top of the first round with Tyreek Hill, McCaffrey, Chase, Justin Jefferson. Stefon Diggs should have been the locked in number 5 or 6 overall pick. So the top 5 or 6 overall off the board are all performing as the top 6 fantasy players pretty much so far.
No, you're right about that. And I think the first round you had a number of hits also wide receiver spot, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like if we redrafted today, those guys are still in the first round. So you just can't predict these injuries. And Chris, I'll also say you never see the repeat wide receiver 1 overall anymore. Like last year was Cooper Kupp was on his way there. This year, Justin Jefferson, he was going to be in the mix. I mean, I don't think you could necessarily put him as the favorite, but he's right up there. And it's every single year now that the repeat wide receiver 1 just does not happen. I think we have to go back to Antonio Brown years and years ago to find that. It's a little bit wild. You always think of running back as a position where that would be very difficult to repeat on.
It's the curse of the number 1 overall fantasy pick, the consensus number 1 overall pick. It seems like 3-4 years in a row he's gone down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing we're going to touch base on some of these wide receivers some of these running backs that were being drafted in this range, but like James Conner, by all intents and purposes, you spent an 8th round pick on him in NFFC, 7th round pick sometimes. He's returned value there, and you've been able to get starts out of him. And he gets injured. He gets sent to the IR. And the Jefferson and Achane injuries were so massive that we're not even like discussing it. No shows are like, how do we react to James Conner? Because it's so unconsequential when you talk about like the potential wide receiver 1 and potential RB2 overall in Achane. It's just wild times.
Yeah, Theo, it really is. The Conner blow is really going under the radar. I feel like you're right. He was going in that 8th, 9th round range, in falling into like the late 80s and 90s overall sometimes. His back, for me personally, I dropped so many Keontae Ingram shares over the last week or two. And then sure enough, this happens, Theo. For Conner, last week, I only have 1 share of James Conner in a big spot, Theo. And I haven't played him through the first 3 weeks because I have some nice running backs ahead of him. Sure enough, I put him in this week. I said, I can't keep watching these points on my fantasy bench. I put him in. And of course, boom, he gets hurt and he has his first bad game. But in that range, he was a home run pick. And he was going to continue to do that, in my opinion, on an offense that we felt coming in, we really wanted no part of. Arizona's offense was one of those offenses that we were mostly avoiding. And Conner was, totally outplaying his ADP. But in that range, once you got past Conner and that Brian Robinson, Khalil Herbert range, it was a complete miss of running backs in that range other than Raheem Mostert, right? Who now all of a sudden with your Achane's injury gets a complete bump. It looks like he's for the foreseeable future locked into an RB1 top 6 overall, spot every week for Mostert, I would say, in this offense. But when you look at that range of the draft, Theo, where Mostert was going, what a swing or miss type of situation. These were the guys that were going around Raheem Mostert on the draft board, if you remember, in that 95 to like 120 range. We had A.J. Dillon bust, Dalvin Cook, Antonio Gibson, Rashad Penny, Tank Bigsby, Sam Pirine, and Jerick McKinnon. Every one of them is a complete miss to the point where you are actually thinking about dropping them if you haven't already. All of them. Okay.
It's the sabotage drop, Chris. That's the classic sabotage drop guy.
Yeah. But think about all those names. That's, we all do this. We get into that pocket of every of our drafts in that 9th, 10th round range. And we're like, all right, we need a solid RB3 or 4, depending on how we built our teams. And that's where we were going. So everyone missed. But if you took Mostert, think about how your whole entire draft flipped. You wound up getting an RB1 out of a mix of 8 or 9 other running backs that are waiver wire drop material. So making that one pick, I look at my drafts, Theo, I go back and it pains me because I look and Mostert was my target in that range. So I do have a lot of Mostert, which is, bailing me out. But I'll look at certain drafts and I'll be like, ooh, I diversified in this one and I took Penny and then Mostert was the next pick after that. Dillon I took and Mostert was the next pick after that. That's the difference between 100 and 125 more points or less points on your fantasy team. That's the difference between a 1-4 start maybe and a 4-1 start. That one pick can flip your draft completely upside down. It's crazy how that happens. Back to your original point of Achane in the 10th or 11th round, how it completely flipped the outlook of your fantasy team so far through 5 weeks if you had Achane or you went in a different direction.
Yeah, and you talk about Achane versus the other rookies like the Bigsbys and the Charbonnets, how he's, it was a similar bet for upside and you totally missed if you didn't go in the right direction there. And I'll say that the Mostert pick is actually super interesting because you saw a lot of structural drafters going with the choice of either getting those early points from Jamal Williams or getting those early points from Raheem Mostert. Yes. And a lot of people went Williams over Mostert. Pirine too. And it's just like the boring veteran pick. One of them's been like not quite a league winner, but almost a league winner in Mostert so far. And we're going to talk about how Miami is going to react from Achane. We're going to talk about potentially a couple other running backs that are going to make an impact in Miami after we hear a word from our sponsors.
Hey, so many ask me, what's wrong with sportsbooks? Why so many of them fail? The answer is simple. They don't innovate. They're just casino sportsbooks on a phone. That's all they've been. There are a few that are doing a good job. We partner with them. Most of them, not so much. Until BetOpenly came along. BetOpenly said, hey, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something groundbreaking. We're going to have peer-to-peer betting in all states, and you pay 1%. When you win, you pay just 1% on your winnings. You heard that right. It's 1%. With code Underworld, you qualify for just that 1% transaction fee on BetOpenly. It gives you ultimate flexibility to set your own lines and browse lines that others have set. Think about it. That's what betting should be. And now that is the reality. BetOpenly.com. The code is Underworld. Check it out.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Empire. I am Theo Gremminger filling in for Nando Di Fino. I'm joined as always by Chris Vacarro. Chris, you talked about Raheem Mostert and, it's obvious the impact he's had, but Jeff Wilson is coming off of the IR. This is a guy that last year had 9 weeks where he was an RB2 or better. And a lot of times in the preseason, it became down from like a Wilson versus Mostert argument. And there was a lot of sharp money on Wilson in best ball and a lot of sharp money on Wilson in redraft. Of course, he gets injured towards the end of the summer and people, obviously adjust to Mostert and Achane. But what are your expectations for Wilson? Because as good as Mostert's been, he hasn't been a guy who stayed on the field most of the time in his career.
Yeah. My expectation is I want to see if he, what the news is in this next day or two, if he's definitely going to come back and play. And breaking news, Theo, into Fantasy Empire, they did just place your boy Achane on IR officially. So that hope of maybe missing just 2 weeks or something like that is done now. So that's going to be 4 games plus. You're looking at after the bye week for Miami, and I believe that's week 10. I think for Miami.
I gotta say, Chris,
Yeah.
from everyone in fantasy football, from everyone at Player Profiler, everyone in high stakes fantasy, get well soon, King. Just rest it up.
Well
come back and win us the fantasy playoffs. Achane, we believe in you. And we're gonna keep our heads up, Chris. This is we're gonna adjust. We're not gonna let that IR.
That's it, Theo. Got to fight through. We got to fight through this, Theo. We're in this together, buddy. Yeah, we're in this together. As for Wilson, though, Theo, it's gonna be funny because I don't think he's available a lot in our leagues. He's mostly already been scooped up and stashed. But people are gonna drop the bag on him tonight, Theo. And my question is, are we gonna be? I feel like. How do I say this, Theo? I feel like with a couple situations here, we got to adjust to these guys aren't out for the season, okay? And we're going to be bidding on these situations in Miami and in Chicago and Arizona tonight, and we're acting as if the starting running back went down and is gone for the season, and we're getting a starting running back and we're dropping big numbers on these guys. If a Jeff Wilson isn't ready to come back into our fantasy lineup this week, what are we doing here? Mostert's still going to be the clear starter. Salvon Ahmed is going to factor in, I believe. I think he deserves warranted free agent money tonight on the waiver wire. And then you look up and Achane will be back, hopefully, just say in 5 weeks. So what are we really overpaying for with Jeff Wilson? If he had the backfield to himself, yeah, sure, $400 or $500 fab money is warranted, but he's still going to come into a time split. He's going to be on the, less than 50% of the snaps to Mostert and whatever Ahmed chips in as well. So I think you're going to see crazy numbers for Wilson. I just don't know if they're going to be warranted.
I don't know. So I would push back a little bit. I think it's you're chasing the offense as much as anything because this offense has just been lightning in a bottle. And again, it's more of a anti-Mostert play and not an anti-Mostert play in. I think Mostert is going to regress. I just don't know if Mostert can hold up with the volume.
Understood.
So Wilson has had a 10-touchdown season, and he's had a 6-touchdown season last year, and he was productive, and this was Mike McDaniel's guy. He signed Mostert, as one of his first free agents, but then he goes and trades for Wilson, guy familiarity with that he had in San Francisco for both of them. So I don't know. It's more of a and then Chris also bring up like a nightmare scenario that I don't want to have to like even think about. But let's say DeVon Achane comes back and can't get over a knee injury. Knee injuries are funny.
Sure.
So
sure.
I don't know. For me, I want to fill my bench with some of these guys that I have contingent upside in the better offenses, but it gets difficult because of all the bye weeks. Now, let me ask you another injury replacement guy.
Yeah.
KJ Osborn, who's not going to be available in NFFC leagues, but he's available in like 90% of Yahoo leagues. And I imagine in a lot of home leagues, he was a huge fab bid kind of guy. And he's sitting out there in some FFPC leagues right now, not too many. What are your thoughts on Osborn as the new replacement for Jefferson? Not necessarily a replacement, but he'll see his snaps.
Yeah, Theo, another guy that I think people are going to go overboard for. But listen, all these guys are major fab budget acquisitions, Theo. They're all going to demand big money, and understandably so. Okay, we don't get this type of this many chances off the waiver wire to add guys that we could bring right into our starting lineup. I think that KJ Osborn will be able to do that. But at the same time, he is a wide receiver compared to a running back. And in the high stakes market, the running backs are more warranted. If I'm going to drop the bag on one of these guys that are available off the waiver wire. And listen, we're at this point right now. We're going into week 6. We're hitting bye weeks. Teams are already decimated with injuries. We're just trying to survive a lot of these leagues and situations right now. So when you could get a player like Osborn Jeff Wilson, all these guys off waiver wires. Yeah, we got to go after them heavy, but I'd rather go after the running backs than the receivers. Okay, KJ Osborn's going to have a nice opportunity in an offense where, listen, he's far from Justin Jefferson, but he's not coming in to be the number one here. I still think Hawkinson's going to see a nice uptick. I still give the advantage to Addison going forward here for the next 4 weeks. Okay, I still think Jefferson will be back
Chris,
in 5 weeks.
Pause.
Yeah.
Addison. Mm-hmm. Addison, like, there's been some mixed opinions on this. Like, I think he's like wide receiver 15 now moving forward with no Jefferson. Where would you have Addison, like, in your confidence level in him in the next few weeks? Like, how much of an uptick?
Low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3. I'm not going to go overboard. I wouldn't go as high as you, Theo. I don't see him as like top 15. I think there'll be some weeks over the next 5 where he has that nice 6 for 80 and a touchdown game. And I think there'll be games where he plays, his 4 for 50 type of role here. But I would, if, I have him over Osborn in a weekly ranking, I would do that. So now what are we doing with Osborn? So he's the 3rd target still, or, he goes from the 4th target to the 3rd target in this Minnesota offense that I think is going to be in a lot of trouble moving forward here over the next month. And, and as for that Minnesota offense, you can't play Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins goes from, oh my God, I hit the home run at the quarterback position, waiting on quarterback and getting Kirk Cousins and his 303 touchdowns weekly type outlook to I'm not playing Kirk Cousins. And there's a lot of quarterbacks now that we could throw in that range. If you think about it, with Kirk Cousins, we just lose Anthony Richardson for those fantasy drafters that hit a home run on him, as well as Daniel Jones being unplayable. So that's 3 right there out of the top quarterbacks that were going in that 9 to 15 overall type range that have just dropped out. So quarterback position's taken a hit as well.
Another quarterback who went down is Anthony Richardson, who's also headed to the IR and was also a guy that you started getting excited about in your lineup, especially with his immense upside. Maybe didn't have the floor that we'd seen early from Kirk Cousins, but on any particular week, Anthony Richardson could rip off 3 touchdown runs. What do you think of Gardner Minshew coming in? And specifically, does this make you more intrigued about Michael Pittman and the guy I like a lot, Josh Downs?
Yeah, Josh Downs. I talked about him with Nando in August, that he was that guy that you should throw $1 on in auctions at the end of your auction game and, take a stab on him in the last couple rounds of your drafts. But it's so crazy how things work out. And I was totally wrong on Anthony Richardson through the first 5 weeks, Theo. I was somebody that I have no shares of and I wasn't touching. And it's funny because when we talked about this Colts offense in August, I said, everybody's forgetting Michael Pittman, on draft boards. Nobody wants Michael Pittman. But what if Anthony Richardson struggles so much out of the gate that they have to sit him down? What happens if that happens and he's just unsuccessful and they bring in a gunslinger like Gardner Minshew? We're all going to be sitting there with regret that we didn't take 8th round Michael Pittman all summer long. And so the opposite happened. Richardson gets hurt, unfortunately, and now it's Minshew instead of Richardson was not productive, and we get Gardner Minshew. But the same outcome, results here. Minshew comes in, and I think Pittman gets a huge bump. I think Downs gets a huge bump now where he could steadily be played as a wide receiver 3 on your fantasy team. And I think Pittman's in line now for the foreseeable future to see some really big weeks as the alpha wide receiver 1 in this offense. So huge upgrade for him. Minshew, you're going to see people go and drop a couple bucks on him just to maybe back up your starting quarterback, maybe drop some Daniel Jones shares, maybe make the flip of dropping Anthony Richardson. I don't think you see Anthony Richardson again, Theo, either this season or maybe late in the season. So for our main regular season of fantasy, you could forget about Anthony Richardson, and I'm totally fine dropping him. The timetable now, as of this morning, was 4 to 8 weeks. And Steichen already said that when asked if we'll see him again this season, he doesn't know. So AC joint. He got the bad AC joint. You're not going to see him for a while, but the only one that benefits, in my opinion, out of all this is Michael Pittman.
And I hate it for Richardson because like he's such a fun player to watch and a guy that you've really rooted for. He's a guy that when you hear him in interviews, he's just super likable, seemed like a real face of the franchise type guy. And now he's gotten injured in multiple games. These kind of guys I worry about, Chris. This is like what we saw with RG3 when he was a rookie. You take those big hits, even if you're 250 pounds and 6'5". You hate seeing that. It's concussion, and then this AC joint. That's not a good injury. What are your thoughts on Richardson being unable to protect himself?
Yeah, I mean, and it goes along with all these quarterbacks, Theo. When you're a Lamar Jackson owner, when you're a Jalen Hurts owner, you hold your breath every time you see these guys take off. Now, that's why we draft them so highly and want these types of quarterbacks that could take off and run and help you out every week on the ground. But, they come with this caveat that at any point they could take the big hit and go down with the concussion, with the in-game concussion, the in-game injury, and we're learning now every week these in-game injuries, they sink your week. You lose your quarterback in the first quarter and you take a 4 at the position. You lose your star running back receiver early in the game and take a 2-point. Those are the weeks that sink you, for that week. And they hurt in the long term. You drop one of those 100-point weeks. Now you fall behind in your league. It's tough, but listen, we're never going to stop drafting these, mobile quarterbacks, Theo. It's just, you just every week hold your breath that you get through the game.
Well, one quarterback where we would not call a mobile quarterback, but he's getting a ton of rushing attempts is Baker Mayfield. Mayfield's sitting there on some waiver wires, and he's like quarterback 14 on the year in points per game. Comes off of a 3-touchdown game. And Chris, they're giving him like 6 to 8 rush attempts per game. So where are you at on Baker Mayfield as like a replacement? And maybe would you rather have Baker Mayfield or Gardner Minshew?
Baker Mayfield, I'd rather have going forward. And it's funny, Theo, you look at our waiver wires at the quarterback position, and there's really not much available. There's the same 4 or 5 guys available on the wire. The Jimmy Garoppolo, Zach Wilsons, and guys like that. There's not much out there if you need help. The Desmond Ritters of the world, who ironically dropped a 32-point game last week, Theo. But Baker Mayfield, I'm waiting to see what the update is here on Mike Evans. When we last saw the Buccaneers, Evans left with a hamstring injury, and that would change my outlook. If Evans is going to miss a couple weeks or he's not ready this week, I don't think I could go back in and play Baker Mayfield, pick him up and play him. This week, we only have the 2 bye weeks, and it's 2 teams with quarterbacks in Kenny Pickett and Jordan Love that we're not trying to replace. But if he was dropped before his bye week, Baker Mayfield, and you want to play the long game, I know I've done that with a lot of my Lamar Jackson teams. I've put Baker Mayfield on my bench to back him up. I don't have a problem with it playing the long game, but if you need him for this particular week here, it'd be based on what the status of Mike Evans is.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thoughts on Trey Palmer? As a guy that you've added to any teams or you're intrigued by as a potential replacement?
Again, yeah, same thing. If I get a practice report today that Evans doesn't look like he's ready to go, well, then all those Trey Palmer bids for tonight are going to get bumped up. And I would see him as the wide receiver 2 coming in behind Godwin, who would get a huge bump up into basically wide receiver 1, top 12 territory for this week versus the Lions secondary that's taken a lot of hits, Theo. But Palmer's that nice guy that could come in, give you a 6 for 60 type game and help you out, for those George Pickens, Christian Watson teams that you had to take guys out of your starting lineup for week 6.
People be more excited about Trey Palmer if they thought of him as LSU Trey Palmer than Nebraska Trey Palmer. You want those LSU wide receivers on your team. When I say Nebraska, it's like,
it's like, no. But give me LSU Trey Palmer.
Oh, yeah, let me get me Trey Palmer from LSU. Chris, we want to give a quick shout out to the chat. It's lit today. Joanna, Tyler, Pablo, smash the like button, everybody. It definitely helps the show. And shout out to Card Palace. Apparently, Chris, I always bend down on podcasts instead of like sitting like this. So shout out
I
to
was
the
just
Card
going to
Palace.
say, you're getting a complaint. You're getting a posture complaint there, Theo.
It's every show I get one. Shout out to the Card Palace. I will, I'll keep you in mind for sure. I'll try not to bend over. Guys, let's take a quick trade question. And I think this is an interesting one, Chris, because it's more of a long-term versus short-term type trade. Should I trade Zack Moss for Achane? I'm 3-2, and I have a pretty good team, and Moss sits on my bench. I think you 1,000,000% make this trade. Manster. Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, no, that's a trade you got to make here. And I'm torn. I don't know what to do with all my Zack Moss shares. I have a lot of Zack Moss, Theo. And last week, I think I played him in one league out of like 6 or 7 that I have him in. I should have looked at the situation a little better, not thinking that Jonathan Taylor was going to step right into the lead spot. But when you factor that in versus the Titans' tough run D, which was at the time tough run defense that Zack Moss shredded, I should have gotten Zack Moss in my lineup. And now I'm faced with that again this week. And I think as a Zack Moss owner, that's what you're going to be facing more and more of going forward as Jonathan Taylor takes more over the backfield. This is the time coming off a 33-point fantasy week where you're moving Zack Moss in leagues that you have him, that you could trade him, because it's only gonna his workload is only gonna come back to the pack as Jonathan Taylor's increases going forward. So yeah, play the long game. See if you could get Achane off of that owner's hands for the Zack Moss and play it out. Now, I would love to see the guy be 4-1 instead of 3-2 and make that move. If you were 4-1, I'm clicking hit real quick on that, but I'm still, I like to play the game of risk, Theo. I'm playing the long game. Give me Achane.
Yeah, you have to take Achane in that trade. And Moss is interesting, Chris, because Taylor comes back. Taylor plays a minimal amount of snaps, gets a minimal amount of carries, but Indianapolis told us that would be the case. Yeah. Again, he's been away from the team until very recently, and Moss goes nuts. Moss has had multiple weeks now of running back one production. It's been like found money. I'm not so sure that Moss has not played well enough to warrant, let's say, 10 to 12 touches a game, even with Taylor, doubt. Depending on the context of your team, that might be good enough for flex value. Like Moss might be the kind of guy that can give you those like 11 points and get you through. What are your thoughts on how this split's going to be?
Yeah, I was going to throw that back at you, Theo. I was going to say, as a Moss owner, which I just said, I'm thoroughly confused on what to do. I see him on my bench, and let's be honest, Theo, when you look at the running back landscape, we don't have the crazy depth. Some of our teams, we have three really nice running backs that we could plug in. And then there's a lot of teams that I'm just struggling every week at the RB2 position. And you look, and Zack Moss has gotten me through September. But how do we not just keep plugging this guy in, even as we know Taylor's going to slowly take over the backfield and be the bell cow? But Moss is playing so great that how does he not warrant 10 to 12 touches every week, even when we look up a month from now and it's Jonathan Taylor's backfield? How do you just take what Zack Moss has done in September and say, hit the bricks, buddy? You're going to play 10 snaps a game and you're going to get 3 or 4 touches a game. I can't see that happening. I think Moss has earned the right now to going forward to be in a 60-40 Jonathan Taylor advantage split. And it's crazy to say that because of Jonathan Taylor's talent. And we might look back in a month from now and go, what were we thinking? Jonathan Taylor is, the top 3 running back in the league. And, we can't let Zack Moss even get any touches. But from what we've seen the first month, Zack Moss has made a complete career turn and looks phenomenal.
Yeah, and these coaches like Shane Steichen, like he's a smart guy. He's been with a winning organization in Philadelphia. And when a guy's been this productive and you just put him on the bench just to get another guy touches, like locker rooms don't like that. This is like, a guy like Zack Moss has been really producing. So I think he's going to, like, Taylor's going to have to play his way into like the bell cow role, but it's coming. If you have Jonathan Taylor, he's an RB1, you're starting him every week. Don't overthink it. But yeah, Zack Moss is definitely an interesting one.
Are you playing Taylor though? How about this? Are you playing Taylor this week?
Yes.
All right, so you got burned in week 1 by Taylor if you had him in your lineup last week, and you feel confident enough now starting this week that Taylor is going to get more than the 10 touches he got last week?
I do. I think that you also have the fact that it's Minshew as a starter versus Richardson, and I think they're going to have to lean on those running backs because as much as we talked about Pittman and Downs as guys we like, they're very limited in terms of the playmakers that they have. So I think getting each running back touches, especially to like fill in for what they were going to get out of Richardson, makes a lot of sense. And Chris, like for me, I can't bench Jonathan Taylor. I already played him last week, and I don't want to miss the game. Like minimal touches could be he falls in the end zone twice too. So like
100%. No, I got you.
You pay that money, you gotta play your studs.
What a steal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be such a steal later on in the season, Theo, when we look, that last week of the season, Jonathan Taylor was going in the 8th and 9th rounds of our high stakes drafts because people expected him. We knew he was missing the first month of the season at minimum, but I think the consensus was that he was going to either sit out the season or, drag out everything maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks down. And nobody was willing to take a top 6-round pick on that. And he was falling to the point now where you look up and the 2 biggest home run picks on the board for value wise that last week of the season are going to be the 2 guys that were the biggest question marks in every draft that final week. And that was Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor. And we go right back into crazy value on the 2 of them.
Let's take one more trade question, Chris. Trade Dameon Pierce and Sam LaPorta for Joe Mixon. He has Mark Andrews currently. I'm a little hesitant to move Sam LaPorta right now, but he does have Mark Andrews. What are your thoughts on this trade?
No, I'm keeping Pierce and LaPorta, and I could do better than getting Joe Mixon, who, the touches are great. I think he had 29 touches last week, but, is there really going forward, if I told you Pierce and Mixon, how big of a difference it was going to be, would you tell me it was so drastic? I don't know about that. That Texans offensive line is getting healthier by the week. I think Dameon Pierce has got a good outlook going forward. It was a rough first month for him, but I think he improves in this season. And then you want to tell me you're sending LaPorta, who's a top 4 tight end, back? Hell no. There's weeks where I could flex out LaPorta with Mark Andrews at the tight end position. So that's an absolute no for me.
And shout out to Chris Vacarro, who's a noted 0 RB guy back in the day. But I'll say you and Dan Williamson, my friend from the GOAT District, you guys are 2 that, once in a while you look at your lineup and you're flexing the tight end. So you've done that in the past. And hey, if you have Sam LaPorta's incredible. And let's stay at the tight end position, Chris, because last week was like a revenge of the tight ends. You had George Kittle game, 3 touchdowns against the hapless Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Goedert, we finally see a Dallas Goedert, smash game. This has been, something where Dallas Goedert, a lot of the Philly newspapers talking about Dallas Goedert has no yak at all in like the first 4 weeks. And then he gets all these opportunities for yak, gives you 25 points. Travis Kelce gets you 22, which you drafted him for 22. But then you also had Darren Waller with 8 catches, despite New York's struggles. Darren Waller, the usage is starting to get there. So where are we at on some of these tight ends that were, and what am I forgetting? Kyle Pitts, who we left for dead. Kyle Pitts is back, baby. You just never take L's, just wait. So where are we at on like these like the tier of tight ends before Evan Ingram, the mix of the guys that went after Kelce, all starting to give you a little bit of production. Is this a 1-week thing? Who's here to stay?
Yeah, I don't know. Theo was. I was looking for it last week when George Kittle went off his once a month go off game. Now he'll go back to getting his 5 points every week for the next 3 or 4 weeks before his blow up 30-point week. And I think that's the situation for a lot of these guys. I was trying to see if it was every year they have that week where it's tight end week. The tight end holiday that George Kittle throws.
He created it.
Yeah, so I thought it was maybe this past week. I thought it was maybe this Sunday because all the tight ends finally woke up and went off. That's what you're going to get with George Kittle. He was a complete fade for me. He has, that this past Sunday was his week. But like I said, he goes right back into that role. Dallas Goedert, same thing. I think he'll be a little more consistent going forward. they need that, that third weapon in the pass game here in Philadelphia. And Devonta Smith has taken a complete backseat this past couple weeks. I won't be surprised if this is Devonta Smith week this upcoming Sunday here with Sauce Gardner most likely following A.J. Brown away every way he goes. It's almost time for Devonta Smith explosion game. But Waller, it was nice to see him get all those targets. You have to say, if I had more confidence, if I want any of these three big ones that we were drafting in the top 8 rounds between Waller, Goedert, and Kittle going forward, I'm still going back to Waller just because you see how this team is playing out now. They're always going to be trailing. They completely suck. And Waller should get those 8 to 10 targets every week, just like he did this past week. But it was nice to see all these guys get, back in our good graces again, because they were all getting to the point where we were looking at each other going, hey, do we even play these guys anymore? We had to because of how bad the tight end position was. But for the elite top 100 guys like Pitts and this, it was nice to see them contribute 15-plus point games. But it was also nice to see the back end guys like Logan Thomas start contributing here. Dalton Schultz had a nice week. These guys are starting to, they're not available on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues, but they're guys that were your tight end too, that you're saying, all right, maybe now I could put them in my lineup and get 12 points every week from them. Whereas it was just looking like 4, 5, 6 points every week from all these tight ends. The 3 for 33s every week we call the tight ends. So tight end position as a whole was a nice bump up this past week. Let's see if it continues going forward. I'm not so sure.
Let's stick with Logan Thomas, because Logan Thomas is going to be out there on some waiver wires for FFPC and NFFC managers. He looked like 2020 Logan Thomas last night, and on Thursday night. And the usage is there. Like we'll touch on we can touch on Curtis Samuel here too, because Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, it's just not happening. Curtis Samuel has outproduced Jahan Dotson by a considerable amount. We could have a whole offseason show about what was the hysteria with Jahan Dotson that we both aided in, Chris. But what are we going to do with how we're treating Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas? Because they both look like guys we want to get in our lineup. Do you have a level of trust for both?
Yes. No, not trust. I don't think I could say that, Theo, because I think this Washington offense is a complete mystery to me.
Yes.
And I was really let down across the board by this Washington offense last Thursday night versus Chicago, especially when they got down big. You're thinking, all right, this is time for Terry McLaurin and Dotson to start going off and get these crazy targets. And then all of a sudden, Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel, who we look at, I think, across the board as the third and fourth option and target in this offense, they were like the top 2. Terry McLaurin was coming off the field in the red zone and not playing 5-6 snaps in a row. And you see Jamison Crowder out there. You see guys you didn't even know were around anymore. So I don't know what's going on here in Washington. Obviously, Brian Robinson in a smash spot. I know we all had Brian Robinson as a top 12 running back last week versus in that matchup. He completely bombed out, and it was it sucked to see on a Thursday night. But Curtis Samuel, you saw people picking him up in some leagues last week going into that game, and I think going forward now you could look at him as a flex play. I think it's, early season Curtis Samuel again this year until he fizzles out late in the season. But I didn't think this Washington offense was going to have so many options and weapons. And I don't want to call them weapons. Let's back up there for a second, Theo. But
they have guys.
You thought it was going to be a consolidated target tree with Terry and Dotson this year. And that's why I like them. But now it's gone out to 4 or 5 guys here, and they're spreading it around.
Speaking of spreading it around, Cooper Kupp makes his debut for the season, has a very strong game, and Puka Nacua still gets a ton of targets and also has a strong game. We feel really good about and then Van Jefferson, who's not really a threat for anything, but he got traded. So it's like you talk about consolidated target trees. This one seems really, really exciting and also very, very consolidated.
It's a dream, Theo.
Yeah.
If you're a Cooper Kupp owner, a Puka Nacua owner, it's a dream right now, and it's so unexpected. And I know we talked about the Rams the last couple weeks on the show. It just went to another height, Theo. And the defense, even though we thought it would be way worse, it's not that bad, but it's still not a good defense. They're going to be in games where they're playing from behind. I think Matt Stafford is entering top 12 quarterback territory, like QB1 territory, now that he's got Cooper Kupp back, even top 10, Theo. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't think it is. I think he's going to have weeks where he's a top 5 QB, top 5 quarterback. Cooper Kupp jumped off the screen last week in his first game back and just looked like old Cooper Kupp to me, Theo.
Yeah.
And going forward, there's enough in this pass game for Cooper Kupp to be the elite wide receiver 1 and Puka Nacua to be an elite wide receiver 2 in your fantasy lineup. It's a dream going forward if you own either of these guys, both of these guys. I'm really high on this Rams offense going forward. And I don't know how many other wide receivers would you put a Kupp if we were drafting today again, Theo? What receivers would you put ahead of Cooper Kupp? Maybe I'm just going overboard with how much I think Cooper Kupp is going to smash going forward. I don't think Puka Nacua is going to be a negative impact on him. I think he's just going to be let's look at this offense like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Now, I know Devonta Smith's been struggling, but I think you got to look at it just like, the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins of the world, those deadly combinations of top 2 receivers that we have a wide receiver 1 and 2. But, to me, I have Cooper Kupp as a top 3 wide receiver overall rest of season if I was drafting right now.
Well, let's do this right now. Who's your wide receiver 1 rest of season? I'll take Tyreek Hill as mine.
I agree. Tyreek Hill is 1.
So we're both on Tyreek Hill as 1.
Yeah.
Now, how about number 2? Right now, I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs because of, the chance that Joe Burrow gets knocked. But I'll go Diggs, and then I'll go Chase. How about you?
All right, so that is an interesting thing because I this topic is based around me and my obsession right now with Diggs. I think that we went a little too far with the Diggs hate in draft seseason, Theo, to the point where he was falling to that.
Well, Nelson Sousa and I took him 6 overall in our New York Super, Chris. So the hate.
2 geniuses. I mean, two brilliant fantasy minds, Theo. It's funny what happened with Diggs, though. I mean, I don't want to get off the topic. We'll get right back to it. But it is funny what happened with Diggs because in July and August, I have shares of Diggs at 14th overall, 13th overall at the turn. If you remember an online championship season, he was falling to the back end of round 1, early round 2 because of all the controversy surrounding him. And people would he was that elite wide receiver 1 that people were starting to fade and get sour on. And what a mistake it was, Theo. It wasn't until late in the draft season, those final 2 weeks, where I think as a fantasy community, we all said, you know what? I think we're looking at this guy negatively for no reason. He's got the superstar quarterback. He is the elite alpha wide receiver 1 in a big offense. And we brought him back into that 5, 6, 7 overall range where he is. But going forward, with everything that's surrounding him, the way this offense doesn't have a third option, where we thought maybe Kincaid or someone else would jump into, I would have Diggs as my number 2 receiver after Hill as well. That's how high I am on Diggs. It's not that drastic of a take, obviously, because he was going mid-first round, but I think Diggs, if we were drafting again, should be the 2nd or 3rd overall pick. So I have him right there.
So you have Diggs at 2, and then you said you have Cooper Kupp at 3.
Yeah, I have Kupp there, and it was a tough call between Kupp and Chase, who I have 3 and 4.
So for me, I don't want to put Kupp at 4. I want to put. I'm actually super, super intrigued by the recent usage for A.J. Brown, and I think the quality of the offense and his potential to just dominate the weeks. I'm going to go A.J. Brown as my 4. So we're both through wide receiver 4. Who would be your wide receiver 5 after Hill, Diggs, Kupp, and Chase?
Another tough call. Came down to 2 guys, but Devontae Adams, another guy that I think we looked at in a negative light. And to be honest with you, he was the answer in the second round at wide receiver out of all these guys. And it just seemed like we wanted to take, and we saw it in draft season, guys putting Waddle ahead of him, Olave ahead of him, Devonta Smith sometimes ahead of him. Just, it seemed like Devontae Adams was that guy that was taking a back seat to all these elite wide receiver ones. And again, wrongfully so. And Devontae Adams is just a complete monster target hound. Didn't have a big game this past Monday, but that's because of the shoulder, I think. I think they wanted to go a little bit away from him. But from what we saw the first 4 weeks of the season, Devontae Adams is this guy that's just going to be that, 10 to 15 targets every week, 8, 9, 10 catches, complete alpha. And I will say this before I throw it back to you for your number 5, Theo. It was a close call between Devontae Adams and Keenan Allen for me.
And Keenan Allen's my 5. So I leave Kupp. I leave Kupp and Adams out of there, but they'd obviously be like the next guys. But I think you're right with Keenan Allen. And I think Keenan Allen, we've already had a 45-point week out of him, and we've had a 30-point week out of him. And now you have the fact that Mike Williams is not there. I think that Keenan Allen could just go off the rest of the season. And when we talk about like the quality of the quarterback, we don't have any question marks about Justin Herbert. We know that he's a locked-in stud. Whereas some of these other guys we've listed, you have the Joe Burrow concerns. You have obviously Jimmy Garoppolo concerns. And Keenan Allen, for me, I don't have anything to worry about. The only negative with Keenan Allen is his age. And I can't I'm not an ageist with wide receivers. So
all of them.
Yeah.
Think about most of these guys that we just mentioned. Devontae Adams is getting a little older. Cooper Kupp is 30.
Yeah.
All these guys are starting to get a little up. Besides Jamar Chase, Diggs is getting older. But guess what? Kings stay kings, Theo.
Yeah, that's right.
Kings stay kings. We're always looking for the next big thing, the next young thing. This year, it was smart to just stay safe and go with these veteran wide receivers. These guys are still the alphas.
Speaking of alphas, before we get out of here, Chris is going to give out another alpha type bet. Last week on the Fantasy Empire, Chris Vacarro gave you the Jacksonville Jaguars money line. And
you remember that, Theo? I was wondering if you remembered that, my friend.
It's funny. It's funny. My wife tells me I forget stuff, but when it comes to fantasy football and NFL, it's like a vault, Chris. The other stuff in my life I'll forget, but football wise, I'm good with it. But before we touch on the gambling,
Theo, 100% Theo.
Lead pipe winners from Chris Vacarro. But yeah, you're the same way, Chris. You'll forget people's names, but you'll remember the third string running back on like the Bears name. Well, that's easy. You'll remember the fourth string running back on the Bears name and the fullback's name, but you can't remember
my ninth round pick. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I remember my 9th round draft pick, who I took in an August draft, but I can't remember what I did yesterday. Yeah, 100%.
It's selective memory, people. It's the things we value the most, we remember the most. And let's quickly talk about one guy we did not discuss when we're ranking wide receivers, but it's wild based on this strong play that we've seen the last 2 weeks. DJ Moore has given us a 27-pointer and then a 49-pointer. He basically effectively ended your week if you were going against him last Thursday. It's all sort of coming together, and I'm going to give you Chicago's next 3 games, Chris. Chicago plays Minnesota in Chicago, then they play Vegas in Chicago, and then they go play the Los Angeles Chargers in Los Angeles. So Justin Fields, DJ Moore have 3 potential smash games coming up. What are your thoughts on DJ Moore?
The revival. It's crazy, Theo. And I think we see this every year, Theo, and we're so quick to, judge over what we see for the first 3 or 4 weeks and then say, this guy's going to be a bust all season long. But we see it. There's a handful of guys and teams that they struggle out of the gate, whether it's like a slow because of the preseason, the way it's set up nowadays. But I think we just need to stick with our draft beliefs, all summer long when we start the season. Yeah, there might be some struggles early, but these guys broke out. And now DJ Moore goes from being a complete bust pick in our eyes in the 3rd round through the first 3 weeks to now looking like the answer in the 3rd round at receiver. So you have to look at him as an elite wide receiver 1, top 10 guy going forward. Justin Fields has turned the corner now. He looks great these last couple weeks. DJ Moore's another guy that just commands wide receiver 1 alpha targets every week with not much behind him in the pass game, and the schedule sets up perfectly. So if you have DJ Moore and you made it through the storm of the first couple of weeks, well, now you get the sunny days going forward. There's no reason why this guy shouldn't be 20+ points on a weekly basis here for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's incredible, but it's yet another wide receiver gets traded and smashes. And it's been happening every single year. And people want to fade it, and they want to say it's not going to happen. But we have question marks about the Bears, but it's certainly not DJ Moore. Like they told you exactly what they were going to do with him in that first preseason game where he scored a touchdown on a screen pass. And people wanted to ignore it, but you had a couple of weeks where it was a little bit slow. You had one dud week, but 2 weeks where he's a winner for you. So,
and it sets up perfectly. Yeah. It sets up perfectly because guess what? We play this game of fantasy, not real life. We don't care that the team sucks. We want the team to pretty much suck when we have a Fields or DJ Moore going. Especially DJ Moore. I want to see end of the first quarter them down 17-3. Now I know I'm set up for 3/4 of a DJ Moore field day of Fields throwing from behind and playing. Those are the dream setups a lot of times. So it's crazy. But, to your point, Theo, I know we all play in our home leagues and stuff. It's funny. I have DJ Moore in a big home league. And after that Thursday night, I'm like, oh, my God, I'm nice win for me. Big number. Only Sunday I'm playing against the Ja'Marr Chase team. Okay. And he matches him. So what's the chances? We rarely see these, these crazy explosion 50-point fantasy games. There's only a small handful of them every year. And to happen in the same week to these two struggling receivers in DJ Moore and Ja'Marr Chase, it was just great to see. Those are the fun weeks. Those are the fun games when you're sitting there watching them and a Chase or DJ Moore gets another touchdown and you just see the points piling up. That's what makes this fun. There's so much struggling and so many down things that we go through as fantasy players, watching our teams and players struggle. But when you have those Sundays of players going apeshit, those are what really make this hobby really fun.
And I'll say, Thursday games take a big knock. Like a lot of people don't like them. I love Thursday football. We're going to complain about extra football. That's a whole nother show, Chris, but people want to complain about everything. But there's almost no greater feeling than when you have a Thursday night smash game. You can feel the win for it. It takes the kind of like the pressure off your back, and you can like bank a win for the whole weekend. And there's less pressure on lineup decisions. Like to have a Justin Fields and DJ Moore stack rocking, or even for
so many of them,
or a Justin
Theo,
Fields,
you saw them,
even
Theo. How many did you see? I don't know about you through all your leagues, and I know we play a ton of volume, we have a ton of teams, but it just seemed like on Friday morning going through your leagues and stuff, there were so many Justin Fields, DJ Moore combinations. And I know we live in a fantasy industry and world nowadays where stacking is all the rage. If you get Chase in the first round, you want to try and get that third round Burrow and so many of these stacks. But I didn't realize there were so many teams that were focused in on getting the third round DJ Moore and bringing him and hooking him up with Fields. So I must have went through 6 or 7 different leagues where, you look up and it was like 100 points on the board for certain teams in my leagues with Fields, DJ Moore combination. And man, you're not kidding, man. When you wake up and you're the DJ Moore or Justin Fields or both owners on Friday morning, the coffee tastes better. You're skipping through the park. You want to take the wife out to a nice dinner that Friday night, and going into Sunday, the expectations and you start dreaming of, is this the week where I go 225? Maybe 250 point wise? I have 100 points banked already and I got all, 8 players left. Those are the weeks that really make it fun when you wake up Sunday morning knowing you have a DJ Moore already locked in your lineup with 50+ points. So it's true. It changes your whole outlook for the weekend because for sickos like us.
Yeah, that's right. And, nothing really seems to bother you. But I'll say this, Roschon Johnson, Chris, this is a guy that we talked about in the pre-show as, one of those guys you were drafting in that the high end, the Bigsby range, the Achane range, the Charbonnet range, maybe a little bit behind those guys. But Roschon Johnson looks like he's set to get his opportunity. What are your thoughts on Roschon? And also add in your thoughts on Deonta Foreman, who's going to get a big number of fab bids in a lot of these NFFC and FFPC leagues.
Yeah, really interesting situation here because I hear over the last 24 hours, a lot of people seem to be favoring Foreman as going into this upcoming week, and I know
the concussion.
I know it's with the expectation that maybe Roschon Johnson isn't ready, but this game was on a Thursday where he got banged up with the concussion, so he has the extra 4 days to recover, and let's wait to see the practice reports. We could see Roschon clear concussion protocol today and everybody's full go. Hopefully we do get that. And then the Foreman bids, I think, will be reduced. If it's flipped and Roschon doesn't practice today and still hasn't cleared, then you're going to see the Foreman people going into their Foreman bids and moving up. But I'm super excited for Roschon Johnson's outlook going forward. It was a guy I was heavily invested in. I was trying to get him. I talked with Nando with this in August that one of my main draft strategies was to grab a Khalil Herbert in that 8th round range and then make sure I jumped up a round or two and got Roschon Johnson just to have the combination of these two guys. And I look across a lot of my leagues and I did it. And it sucks that I lost Khalil Herbert with the high ankle sprain that when I saw the high ankle sprain that Herbert had, it's going to be one of those situations where don't believe this 2-week crap. No. This is a high ankle sprain that's going to cost him 4 to 6 weeks. So you're not going to forget about Khalil Herbert for the foreseeable future. Roschon Johnson has a chance now to take over this backfield, show what he's about. I love the kid. I think he's going to be a future RB1 star. And hopefully he's back in the lineup. He gets great matchups going forward, starting with this week in Minnesota. I think Foreman will be one of those desperation flex plays, RB2s, if you need help to get 8-10 points. Maybe he gets in the end zone. Both of them are going to be useful, but Roschon Johnson has the opportunity here versus Minnesota to have a game where he gets 15 to 20 carries, take over the role, and this time next week we're talking about him as a low-end RB1 for the next month or two, and maybe even the rest of the season if he takes the job and runs with it, no pun intended.
Yeah, and I think that the most attractive thing about his game, he's a fine runner, but it's a big back who can catch the ball. And those big backs that provide some receiving ability, you're insulated. It doesn't take a whole lot for you to end up being like RB12 on the week, RB15 on the week. So he's got some safety in his game as well. So, Chris, we just before we get out of here, we're over an hour. Give us a prediction on the winning bids for Deonta Foreman and Amari Demarcado. These two guys who are kind of sitting on the waiver wires. It's tough. I'm going to say both of them go north of 20%. I think it's going to be 200 plus for both of them. I'm going to go 231 for Demarcado average bid, and I'm going to say 211 average bid for Deonta Foreman. Where are you at?
I think you're right in the ballpark there, Theo, and I think it's going to depend on how desperate certain teams are in this league, in our leagues for help at running back. I think you'll see 3-4 plus 100 on Demarcado for those particular teams that are desperate, that can bring in a guy that could give you 10-12 fantasy points. Foreman, I think Demarcado will be higher bid-wise average than Foreman will be because he's stepping right into a spot where we expect him to be the top running back here. But let's not forget about Keontae Ingram, and he's available on waiver wires, and he's going to demand some money too because we don't know how this backfield is going to shake out. So I'll say Demarcado in that 250 range, 250, 300 range, and Foreman in that 180 to 225 range as well.
Now, Chris, this is the moment where we got a lot of people tuning in right now. Appreciate all the live viewers. This has been really, really a fun one today. And guys, if you we didn't get to everybody's questions, I'll take one quick one. Chuka Baby said, should we trade Gibbs for Roschon Johnson in Dynasty? No. In Dynasty, I want Jahmyr Gibbs 100%. Don't do that. And then Chef wants to say that he told us all to go get Demarcado. I got some Demarcado bags. Any team I split with Billy Muzio, we got Demarcado, and I got a bunch of teams with $1 Demarcado ads. So I got some bags of Chef. Do you have some Demarcado, Chris, to flex on?
I do. Yeah. Me and Mike Edelman, we picked him up for $2 last week on a team we split, and I got a bunch of bags on Demarcado at $10 or less in the last 2 weeks as well. If you were in a league with you or Nelson Sousa, you probably don't have Demarcado because you guys were ahead of the curve on that one a few weeks back. So shout out to you guys for getting a lot of $5 or less Demarcados.
Nelson's really good with
nice
Nelson's
amount of
really
shares.
good. Nelson's really good with spotting the waivers before they happen. And shout out to Michael Edelman.
Yes,
Michael Edelman, you don't see him on so many podcasts, but he's one of the best players in the world. Probably the best player in the state of New Jersey, I would say, is Michael Edelman. I think that's a fair shake, Chris. Fair shake to everybody out there in Jersey. But listen,
we'll do next week. Next week, we'll do rankings of best fantasy football players by state.
I can. New York's a very difficult one, and you definitely hurt some feelings. But I'll tell you this: Nebraska's easy. Chad Schroeder is Nebraska.
Sure.
Texas is tough because you have Dave Hubbard, Anna Agbatoba, and Noah Rudell. I could go state by state here with you. Billy Wazowski's got to be the best player in the state of Virginia.
Yeah.
Gotta be.
Is Billy in Virginia or Pennsylvania?
I thought Billy's in Virginia. This is a good conversation, though.
We might have to do that one.
This is going to hurt some feelings. You're getting some people cursing us out.
People be calling. People be texting me. Where the hell? I live in California. How dare you forget me?
They're going to be showing you their receipts. And say, listen, I got the receipts. But Chris, you got the receipts from the gambling perspective, and this is a fantasy football show, but it's also a Chris giving out winners show for free. And remind everybody where they can come down and say thank you in person and maybe purchase a meal and a couple of drinks, Chris, if they want to chat football with you.
Yeah, man. If you took Jacksonville money line and the points last week, then you should come through to Greenwich Street Tavern in New York City in Tribeca and spend a couple of those the bucks that you won with my Jags pick. And I don't know, did I also give the Jets as my second best bet on this show, Theo, or in my article last week? Those are my two best bets for last week with Jacksonville and the Jets.
I think on the show it was just the Jaguars, but nice call with the Jets as well. But
trust me, I'm not always on the money like that. But last week was a good week for gambling.
You specifically gave out the money line, which makes it even more special. The Jags were what, a 5-point dog, 6-point dog?
The Jaguars were 5.5 or 6, and money line they were plus 210. And they made that game a little too close for my liking. They should have blew the Bills off the field in the first half. They are still struggling. They still let Buffalo hang around, but at the end of the day, they held down. But the arrow's pointing up for our Jacksonville Jaguars. Theo,
big time. Yeah, big time.
We're still not where we're at, where we want to be with Jacksonville's offense, with Lawrence and all these guys. And hopefully, well, I don't want to say hopefully, but Zay Jones did get banged up again in that game. He might miss some more time now with that knee issue that kept him out the last couple of weeks. If you're a Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram owner, and Zay Jones misses some times, it's time to smash on those guys once again here going forward. Jacksonville just might be that offense and team that they needed to get through the first 3 or 4 weeks, get over the hurdle, and now going forward, their offense is going to keep growing week in and week out, in my opinion.
And shout out to the King of England. Whatever you said to those Jaguars when you were in the locker room, it worked. Shout out to King Charles. So King Vacarro over here, give us the lead pipe lock, the 100 unit guaranteed game. Give us the game you're looking at. Or you can give us two.
I'm going to give you two real quick. I'm going to give you two real quick and one possible major upset. I'm laying the 6.5 with the Rams at home. Back-to-back home games for the Rams. They come up short versus the Eagles. Arizona's in shambles. I think Stafford and that Rams offense with Kupp now, they win something like 34-13 at home over Arizona. I'm laying the 6.5 with the Rams this week. That's my top play. I also really like Baltimore to bounce back off of a bad loss going to London, laying the 3.5 or 4 versus a Titans team that I think sucks. I think the Ravens are getting healthy. They're getting Ronnie Stanley healthy. couple guys back on defense. I think the Ravens win this game by a touchdown plus over there. Bounce back game for Lamar Jackson. So the Ravens and the Rams are my top 2 plays I'd lay the points with. And then I want to, sounds crazy because the line just smells terribly. Everyone's going to see San Francisco's only laying 5.5 or 6 points. The best team in the NFL. Why versus the Browns are they only laying that points? Going on the road after an emotional high versus Dallas, smashing Dallas, being 5-0 now. San Francisco's looking great. Now they go on the road unmotivated into enemy territory versus Cleveland. If Deshaun Watson gets the go-ahead end of this week, I'll money line the Browns, Theo. This is a perfect spot for one of those, how the hell did San Francisco lose early in the season type game versus a decent Cleveland Browns team? If they have Watson healthy, Theo, give me the Browns, the points, and money line.
Teams coming off a bye are always dangerous to bet against. They have 2 weeks to prepare, and they should be getting healthier. So this was a lot of fun. Chris, let everybody know where they can find your work.
Yeah, Theo, thanks for stepping in for Nando again. Always fun doing the show with you. And you can catch me at The Athletic. My article every Thursday comes out at The Athletic, and on Twitter, Chris Vacarro, GST.
And you can find all my written work at Player Profiler. I'm going to be back later tonight with Adam Levitan of Establish the Run for press coverage. We're actually going to be airing that at 9 o'clock tonight. It's going to be pre-recorded. So if you're yelling lineup questions at me in the chat and I start sick questions and I'm not replying, it's because it's pre-recorded. But tune in tonight at 9 o'clock. Adam Levitan of Establish the Run on press coverage. And then First Class Fantasy tomorrow, John Daigle of 4for4. Tune in every week here to the Fantasy Empire at 11:30 or 11 once in a while. But right in this wheelhouse in the morning, make sure you follow Chris Vaccaro. Make sure you follow Nando Di Fino. And stick with us here at Player Profiler. We've got you covered all week long with some awesome shows. And enjoy the rest of your week and crush your leagues this weekend.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.